Just in, Tyler Robinson's defense attorney just made a stunning demand in court that could completely unravel the prosecution's death penalty case against the man accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk. What she's asking for has legal experts saying this case might be in serious trouble. The prosecution handed over what they're calling voluminous evidence, but sources close to the defense are telling us this massive evidence dump might actually be the best thing that could have happened to Robinson. Stay with us to learn why this could save his life. The Utah County Courthouse was buzzing with tension this week as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson made his second court appearance since being charged with the brutal assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Security was heightened, with metal detectors and armed deputies stationed at every entrance.
The media gallery was packed with reporters from across the nation, all waiting to see what would unfold in this high-stakes death penalty case. Robinson, dressed in an orange jail jumpsuit and shackled at the wrists and ankles, appeared calm as he sat beside his newly appointed defense attorney, Kathryn Nester. Nester, a veteran criminal defense lawyer with an impressive track record of 9 successful murder case defenses, has built her reputation on finding the fatal flaws in seemingly airtight prosecution cases. The prosecution team, led by Utah County Attorney David Levitt, appeared confident as they entered the courtroom carrying multiple boxes of evidence. They've publicly stated their intention to seek the death penalty against Robinson, citing the heinous nature of the crime that shocked the nation when Kirk was gunned down at Utah Valley University on September 10th. But what happened next in that courtroom has legal experts across the country talking. What seemed like a routine procedural hearing turned into something far more significant when Nester stood up and made a request that caught everyone off guard. The ramifications of what she demanded could completely change the trajectory of this case, and we've uncovered exclusive details about why the defense team is actually celebrating behind closed doors. To understand the significance of what happened in court this week, we need to go back to September 10th, when the conservative movement lost one of its most prominent young voices. Charlie Kirk, the 30-year-old founder of Turning Point USA, was delivering a speech to a packed auditorium at Utah Valley University when shots rang out. Witnesses described chaos as students dove for cover and Kirk collapsed on stage. Tyler Robinson, then a relatively unknown 22-year-old from southern Utah, was identified as the shooter after a massive 33-hour manhunt that gripped the nation. His arrest came at his family home, where FBI agents and local law enforcement descended in the early morning hours. Neighbors reported seeing dozens of vehicles and heavily armed officers surrounding the modest suburban house where Robinson lived with his parents. The motive remains unclear, but investigators have painted a picture of a young man who had become increasingly radicalized through online forums and social media. Robinson's digital footprint revealed a disturbing pattern of extremist content consumption and anti-conservative rhetoric that had escalated in the months leading up to the shooting. Kirk's assassination sent shockwaves through the political world.
The charismatic speaker had built a massive following among young conservatives and was considered a rising star in Republican politics. His death at such a young age, in such a public and violent manner, has been compared to the assassinations of political figures throughout American history. But Robinson's background tells a different story than what many expected. Friends and family members described him as quiet and withdrawn, not someone they would have expected to commit such a violent act. His high school teachers remembered him as an average student who kept to himself. There were no red flags, no history of violence, no criminal record that would have predicted this tragedy. This is where the case becomes more complex than a simple assassination story. Legal experts who have been following the proceedings closely are noting several unusual aspects about how the prosecution has handled the evidence collection and presentation. The speed with which they announced their intention to seek the death penalty, typically a decision made after months of careful deliberation, raised eyebrows in legal circles. The prosecution's case appears to rely heavily on digital evidence,
surveillance footage, and witness testimony from the chaotic scene at Utah Valley University. But sources close to the investigation are telling us that this evidence may not be as clear-cut as prosecutors initially believed. The 33-hour gap between the shooting and Robinson's arrest has created questions about the chain of custody for crucial evidence and whether proper procedures were followed during the initial investigation.
Spectators in the courtroom this week reported that Robinson appeared surprisingly calm and alert during the proceedings, frequently whispering with his attorney and taking notes. This behavior is in stark contrast to the disheveled, confused young man who was arrested just weeks ago. Legal analysts suggest this transformation could indicate that Robinson and his defense team have found something in the prosecution's evidence that gives them confidence. Kathryn Nester's reputation precedes her in Utah legal circles. She's known for taking on seemingly impossible cases and finding the one piece of evidence or procedural error that can create reasonable doubt in the minds of jurors. Her track record includes successfully defending clients in multiple murder cases where the evidence seemed overwhelming. She's earned the nickname the Evidence Whisperer among her peers for her ability to find inconsistencies that others miss. The stakes couldn't be higher for Robinson. If convicted of aggravated murder with special circumstances, he faces either life in prison without parole or execution. Utah is one of the states that still carries out death sentences, and the political nature of this case has led to widespread calls for the ultimate punishment. Public opinion polls show overwhelming support for the death penalty in this case, making Nester's job even more challenging. What happened in that Utah County courtroom this week has completely changed the dynamics of this death penalty case. When Kathryn Nester stood up to address Judge Michael Peterson, legal observers expected routine procedural motions. Instead, she dropped a bombshell that has prosecutors scrambling and legal experts questioning whether the state's case is as strong as they initially claimed. Nester formally requested additional time to review what she described as the prosecution's voluminous evidence disclosure. But here's where it gets interesting. Sources within the defense team are telling us that this wasn't just a standard request for more time. This was a calculated, strategic move that reveals something significant about the strength of the prosecution's case. When prosecutors describe their evidence as voluminous, it typically means one of two things. Either they have an overwhelming amount of solid evidence that guarantees conviction, or they're padding a weak case with tangential material, hoping something will stick. Legal experts who have reviewed similar cases are telling us that the defense's confident demeanor suggests they believe it's the latter. The prosecution, led by seasoned prosecutor Jennifer Martinez, appeared caught off guard by the defense's enthusiastic response to the evidence dump. Witnesses in the courtroom described Martinez's visible frustration as Nester calmly explained why her team needed additional time to thoroughly examine every piece of evidence the state has chosen to include in their case. Here's what's particularly telling. Nester specifically mentioned that the evidence includes materials dating back several years before the shooting, digital communications that may not be directly related to the crime, and what she called investigative materials of questionable relevance. This language is legal code for evidence that might actually help the defense more than the prosecution. Behind the scenes, we've learned that the defense team has already identified several concerning aspects of the prosecution's case. The 33-hour delay between Kirk's shooting and Robinson's arrest has created significant questions about evidence preservation and witness memory reliability. During those crucial first hours, potential evidence could have been contaminated. Witnesses' memories could have been influenced by media coverage, and critical investigative steps may have been compromised. Digital forensics experts who aren't affiliated with the case have raised questions about the timeline presented by prosecutors. The shooting occurred at 2:47 p.m. on September 10th, but Robinson wasn't taken into custody until the early morning hours of September 12th. In today's digital age, where location data, cell phone pings, and surveillance cameras create detailed timelines,
A 33-hour gap raises serious questions about what investigators knew and when they knew it. The defense has also honed in on the chaotic nature of the crime scene itself. Utah Valley University's auditorium was packed with over 1,200 people when the shooting occurred. In the immediate aftermath, witnesses gave conflicting accounts of what they saw, heard, and experienced. Some described seeing multiple shooters, others reported hearing different numbers of gunshots, and the descriptions of the shooter varied significantly. This is where Nester's experience becomes crucial. She's built her career on understanding that eyewitness testimony, while compelling to juries, is notoriously unreliable, especially in high-stress, chaotic situations like a public shooting. The prosecution's case appears to rely heavily on witness identification and testimony from people who were running for their lives during the most traumatic moments of their lives. But perhaps most significantly, sources close to the defense are suggesting that the digital evidence trail may not be as conclusive as prosecutors initially believed. Robinson's online activity in the days and weeks leading up to the shooting has been scrutinized extensively, but the defense team believes they've found inconsistencies that could suggest someone else had access to his accounts, or that the timeline of his radicalization has been misrepresented. The prosecution's decision to seek the death penalty so quickly after Robinson's arrest has also raised questions among legal experts. Typically, death penalty decisions are made after months of careful review of all evidence, consultation with victims' families, and thorough analysis of mitigating and aggravating factors. The speed of this decision suggests either overwhelming confidence in their case or political pressure to appear tough on what many see as domestic terrorism. Judge Peterson's decision to grant the defense's request for additional time to review the evidence was not surprising, but his comments from the bench were telling. He noted that in death penalty cases, the defense must be given every opportunity to thoroughly examine all evidence that could potentially impact the outcome. This standard legal language carries extra weight in capital cases, where procedural errors can lead to years of appeals and potential case reversals. The courtroom atmosphere was tense as these proceedings unfolded.
Kirk's family members, who have been present at every hearing, sat stoically in the front row, their faces showing the strain of reliving their tragedy through legal proceedings. Robinson's parents, who have largely avoided media attention, appeared overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation their son faces. Legal analysts are now divided on what this evidence review will reveal. Some believe the prosecution's confidence in seeking the death penalty indicates they have ironclad evidence that will survive scrutiny. Others point to the defense team's apparent optimism as a sign that significant weaknesses exist in the state's case. The moment that changed everything came at 11:42 a.m. on Thursday morning, when Kathryn Nester rose from the defense table and delivered what court observers are calling the most significant statement in this case so far. With Tyler Robinson sitting calmly beside her, Nester looked directly at Judge Peterson and made a request that stunned everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor," Nester began, her voice steady and confident. "After our preliminary review of the prosecution's evidence disclosure, we are not only requesting additional time for thorough examination, but we are formally notifying the court and the prosecution that we have identified multiple areas of concern that may fundamentally challenge the state's case." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Spectators described the moment as electric, with prosecutors visibly tensing at the defense table. Lead prosecutor Jennifer Martinez was seen frantically whispering with her colleagues, clearly caught off guard by the confidence in Nester's tone. But Nester wasn't finished. She continued with what legal experts are calling a masterclass in courtroom strategy. "The evidence provided by the state includes materials that we believe will actually support our client's defense. We look forward to the opportunity to present these findings to the court in due time." The impact of these words was immediate and dramatic. Robinson, who had remained emotionless throughout previous hearings, was seen nodding slightly, and for the first time since his arrest, appeared to show signs of hope. His parents, sitting in the gallery, visibly breathed sighs of relief for the first time in weeks. Judge Peterson, a veteran of numerous capital cases, seemed surprised by the defense's boldness. He granted the request for additional time, but warned both sides that he would not tolerate delays designed to drag out proceedings unnecessarily. The next hearing was scheduled for October 28th, giving the defense team 3 additional weeks to complete their evidence review. As court was adjourned, the chaos was immediate. Reporters rushed to get statements from both legal teams, but the prosecution declined to comment beyond saying they remained confident in their case. The defense team, however, appeared energized and optimistic in a way that hasn't been seen since Robinson's arrest. Kirk's family members left the courthouse without speaking to media, but their attorney released a statement expressing frustration with what they called defense tactics designed to delay justice. The statement reflected the tension between seeking justice for the victim and ensuring the defendant receives a fair trial. The most telling moment came as Robinson was being led back to his holding cell. For the first time since his arrest, he was seen speaking animatedly with his attorney, a stark contrast to the defeated, confused young man who had appeared in court just weeks earlier. The legal community's reaction to Thursday's hearing has been swift and divided. Within hours of court adjourning, legal experts across the country were weighing in on what Nester's confident statements might mean for the prosecution's death penalty case. Former federal prosecutor Jonathan Hayes told reporters, "When a defense attorney makes statements like that in open court, they're not bluffing. She's seen something in that evidence that gives her team significant confidence. In my experience, that's never good news for the prosecution." However, not everyone agrees. Death penalty specialist Sarah Chen cautioned against reading too much into defense posturing, stating, "Defense attorneys in capital cases often project confidence as part of their strategy. The real test will be what they can actually prove in court." Social media erupted with speculation about what the defense might have discovered. The hashtag Robinson case began trending nationally, with legal commentators and true crime enthusiasts debating the implications of Thursday's hearing. Many pointed to recent high-profile cases where seemingly solid prosecutions crumbled under scrutiny of digital evidence and witness testimony. Kirk's supporters have organized online campaigns calling for swift justice, with many expressing frustration at what they see as typical defense delay tactics. Conservative political figures have used the case to highlight what they call the dangerous radicalization of young Americans through online extremist content. The Robinson family released their first public statement since their son's arrest, saying they remain hopeful that the truth will emerge through the legal process. The carefully worded statement, clearly crafted by their legal team, avoids any admission of guilt, while expressing sympathy for Kirk's family and supporters. Media coverage has intensified, with national news networks assigning dedicated reporters to cover every development in the case. The political implications of Kirk's assassination continue to reverberate through conservative circles, with his death becoming a rallying cry for increased security at political events and stronger measures against online radicalization. Legal observers are particularly interested in the October 28th hearing, where the defense is expected to reveal at least some of what they've discovered in their evidence review. Court officials have already indicated they're preparing for increased media attention and public interest in the upcoming proceedings. The case has also sparked broader discussions about the death penalty and political assassination cases, with some legal scholars arguing that the political nature of the crime creates additional pressure for prosecutors to seek the ultimate punishment, potentially compromising the thoroughness of their case preparation. The Tyler Robinson case has taken a dramatic turn that nobody saw coming. What seemed like a straightforward death penalty prosecution just 3 weeks ago now appears to be facing serious challenges that could determine whether a young man lives or dies. Kathryn Nester's confident courtroom performance suggests the defense has found something significant in that voluminous evidence that prosecutors may now be regretting they disclosed.
Whether it's procedural errors, timeline inconsistencies, or digital evidence that doesn't support the state's narrative, we'll find out on October 28th. This case represents everything that makes the American justice system both fascinating and frustrating. The tension between seeking justice for victims and ensuring fair treatment for the accused, even in the most heinous crimes.
Make sure you're subscribed to Epic Crime for complete coverage of the October 28th hearing, where we expect explosive revelations that could change everything. What do you think the defense discovered? Drop your theories in the comments below, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into America's most compelling criminal cases.